This deity, Janna, is going to help us grasp why watching Arcane really is IQ Diff. The first question that becomes important after watching this series is, are we actually smart enough as Arcane's audience to grasp what is going on in the series? Do we understand everything? Or rather, are we able to pay attention to all of the important details that we are presented visually, audibly, and metaphorically? Doing all of this while also keeping up with the narrative of the show, which is also very important. When the floor around Mel isn't damaged, do we notice it? Once Maddie is outed as Mbessa's spy, do we revisit episode 1 to observe that it was her smoke that provided cover for Mbessa's forces? Understanding Arcane is a brain gap because of the copious amounts of information one has to process at a single given moment. And even if you do manage to catch everything that's given to you in the series, you might not play League of Legends, meaning there's a whole layer of lore and references that you might not even understand from that aspect. This all leads us to the best example that I've got. Janna's involvement in the second half of the series is extremely underplayed, while doubly as important. While Timo will show up in games in the series, books, or get referenced in Isha's hat design, his role is limited to just visual references and representations. He never really impacts the stories. Whereas a character like Janna that we don't see does impact the story. Before we get into how she does this, I think we need to understand who Janna is. She is a wind spirit, revered as a protector and a savior by those in Zon. Legends describe her as a benevolent goddess who calms storms, guides ships, and brings good fortune to those who honor her. In the polluted, poverty-stricken depths of Zon, Janna's presence became more pronounced as she transitioned from a maritime protector to a guardian of those who struggle in Zon. These Zonites, plagued with industrial hazards and chaotic living, turned to the goddess for her aid. It is said that in moments of despair, when lives hang by a thread, a sudden gust of wind or appearance of a blue-clad figure signifies the appearance of this deity. She is a symbol of hope and resilience to the oppressed members of Piltover's Undercity. Her presence in Arcane is first awakened by a grief-stricken topsider named Caitlyn who would ironically prove to be the deity's main opposition in the series. Caitlyn's emotions stir up the wind, and Janna responds by gently lifting the flower petals that she had set on her mother's grave. We know it's Janna doing this here because of the spiral shape of the wind structure and the shape of the wind blowing the petals around it. This is of course in keeping to her Q ability in League of Legends. The next metaphor reads like this. Caitlyn wants to take these petals that Janna has lifted, i.e. lifting the weight and the grief of her mother's death, and she wants to take these petals and drop them down on Jinx. Basically, she wants to kill Jinx on the battlefield, bringing revenge to her mother and putting Jinx in the same state. This is the root of Caitlyn's questionable behavior in the second season. Her rage leads her to unleash the Grey on the Undercity. The Grey is a form of toxic gas that affects one's ability to breathe and corrodes their organs. Caitlyn uses this as a tool to hunt down the Chem Barons, specifically Margot and Kroos. We can see that Janna doesn't intervene with these Chem Barons' fates. However, this blue figure does intervene when it comes to a certain character. This other figure that she calls out to is also deeply tied to the color blue. It's Jinx. After being exposed to the Grey and angered by her sister's betrayal, Jinx heads down to the main air ducts of the Undercity and ends up releasing Janna's rage upon Topside, leading the citizens of Piltover to get gassed by this toxin, the Grey, as well. This is somewhat a great balancing act. It acts as redemption for the Undercity. And after this balancing act plays out, Caitlyn seizes her use of this poisonous gas in Zon. What this scene between Vi, Caitlyn, Savika, and Jinx also did very quietly is that it turned Jinx into Janna. They are the same thing. The IQ diff parts about all of this being that none of it was ever explained. Jinx and Janna become the same entity, which is why Jinx has this cult following that starts treating her much better than she treats herself. They are also tied deeply, again, to the color blue. which is a crossover to Janna as well. In fact, the more you watch the series, you start to realize how often this intertwined relationship between Jinx and Janna was hinted at the entire time. For me, the blatant direct references begin with Jinx's hideout, which is formed with huge propeller blades. Her entire motif has often been tied to wind, from her tattoos to the crows that often follow her around being winged creatures, also to her not being able to sink with Silco when he goes deep into the water. Another one is this from the first episode, something that is revisited in the last scene of the series.
One day, I'm gonna ride in one of those things.
Even in the Great War, when she arrives with Echo, another character who's loosely tied to wind because of the firelights and the boards they ride, they arrive to the battlefield in the sky. When Jinx reminds Vi of the old bedtime stories that Vander would tell them about this wispy wind woman, as she puts it, this deity, she does it in a mocking way. She's not really a believer of this Janna figure and the power that this Janna figure has, which is peak irony because for most of the series, this entity, this deity Janna, has chosen Jinx as a vessel to operate her actions through. She becomes Zorn's hero, their salvation. The last time we see Janna's intervention is way more subtle, but again tied to death. It is when they do the tributes to everyone who passed away in the war, and we can see the wind softly and gently take away all of these names as somewhat heroes of the city. That is what Janna is about. She is about the protection and the honoring of this great city of Piltover and Zorn. Now I'm sure by watching this video, you would have already started to realize the copious numbers of times we see Jinx tied to references of the air or associated with winged creatures, stuff like that. You can now just begin to stomach and let it sit in that none of these associations are unintentional, and even small things like her always hovering above Silco's head in the last drop are a nod to this Jinx and Janna parallel. She is meant to be associated to the sky. Her supposed death plays out as a scene of her falling from grace, falling out the sky, going deep into the waters of death like Silco did. But of course, we know she survived. This is the part of Arcane that makes it a masterpiece, and it's also the part that makes it very hard for most of us to understand. A lot of this stuff goes over our heads until we find a YouTuber like myself who meticulously watches the series and breaks down things that we missed or did not catch. We can see that they've managed to tell an underlying narrative of this god that comes and saves a city from themselves without ever having to tell that story. This is why Arcane is IQ Diff. As much as I could give you this Jinx and Janna parallel, which I find amazing, I might have missed 100 other things with a character like Victor, which is maybe someone I should look into anyway. But for now, I just want to give an appreciation to how tight Arcane actually is. I'm gonna keep saying it. This show is a masterpiece. This is Lois signing off. Peace.